This is the April 11th, 2024 meeting of Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Dale Vaughn. I'm the chair of the commission. I'd like to remind everyone present to please silence phones and other electronic devices during the meeting. We'll go ahead and have council members introduce themselves, starting with the council liaison.
Mark Lester, City Council Liaison.
Randy Hutchinson, alternate.
Tricia Young.
Tom Wordnhouse.
Jacob Robinette.
Penny Quigg, Vice Chair.
Shannon Hawk.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Sarah Michael.
Hank Vogt.
Courtney Bliss, City Planner.
Eric Barron, City Planner.
Clint Smith, Director of Planning and Protective Services.
Sean McCall, Associate City Attorney.
Shane Wade, Planner, Review and Development Engineer.
Tiffany Pearson.
The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of regular members. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I declare that quorum is present. There are no members absent, I believe. And are there any members who are disqualified from voting on any agenda item? No. Every member here, the voting members that are here presently here are able to vote, except for, I guess, the alternate, right?
Let's get ready to jump in there, except for Sarah.
Oh, Sarah.
So that's.
So your day is coming.
I tried, Sarah.
So there's one vacant position within the regular membership. So the senior alternate, Randy, would eligible to vote. Sarah can participate in discussion, but not eligible to vote.
Thanks, Eric.
Just this time though.
Is someone in attendance to present the case P24004 Trade Center Parkway? Somebody here for that, okay. And someone is here to present the case for the 1131 Boonville Road and for the Portobello Place Drive. Are there any requests for continuing?
No, we have not received any requests.
To kind of, we're going to rearrange the agenda a little bit. We're actually going to have the last case, the Portobello Place Drive, go first. I believe is that what you decided?
Yeah, do I need to make a motion? I'm happy to make a motion if I need to.
So I think the item on the agenda would be adoption of the agenda as printed or reordered. Make a motion to reorder the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to reorder the agenda to move case number P24003 to number 1 and then continue the order as is on the agenda after that.
Got it.
Second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Motion passed. Let's see here. Courtney, would you please read the format of the hearing and order of testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to briefly describe the procedures of the commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please project your vote and say your name. The standard order of each case is as follows. After introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant or their consultant will provide information on the request. The only presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant should have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then give their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, references to printed materials, applicable findings, and staff reports shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will close testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination of its reasons. Before a motion shall be positive, that is that the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modification, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chair shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting. The City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the comprehensive plan and land use map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, Drafted out of publication of the public notice in the newspaper. Copies of drawings, plans, and/or renderings under consideration. Letters and memorandum from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant. Rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection through the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Courtney. Can I have a motion to approve the regular minutes of March 18th, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. So we do have some correspondence in regards to the Boonville rezoning. So has everybody seen the packet on that? Does anyone need any more time to read through the correspondence before we proceed? We can give you a moment to read through it. Okay, since the case on the Boonville Road is second, we'll go ahead and continue, if that's okay with everybody.
Be third, actually.
Third, excuse me. And so we'll go ahead and move on to the 1238 Trade Center Parkway. And Courtney.
No.
Sorry, my bad. Forgot to reorder it.
Mr. Chair.
That's okay. Get that here. That was the last one. Moving on to case P24003 Portobello Place Drive, final subdivision plat. Courtney, could you please present the case?
Mr. Chair, so this section is for section 5 of the Leach Crest subdivision and is zoned RA1 high density residential. Surrounding zoning includes C2 central commercial, C1 neighborhood commercial and PUD with there being commercial uses. That's to the north. RS2 with there being single family residential use. To the south is RS2 and RS3 single family residential. And then to the west is RA1 and then C2 with there being commercial and multi-family residential uses. This is a image of the location where that subdivision plat will be, and it includes just a little bit of the different sections in their placement with respect to that property. And so you can see there that there are 6 different sections, but this one is just pertaining to section 5. And it is going to be for, or it is set up for multi-family, either duplex or triplex uses. This is the subdivision plat that has been submitted, and the total acreage for the subdivision is 26.08 acres. There are 49 lots proposed, and all lots fit the, or they meet the required lot size requirements as outlined in Article 5 of the zoning code. There's an extension of Cathedral Drive, and then there are two new streets that are proposed as part of this, which is Arch Rock Drive and Communal Rock Drive. And both sides of the parking, 30 feet wide measurement backside of the curb, which will allow for parking on both sides of the street. There is a sidewalk proposed for both sides of the sidewalk, or sorry, the street. And I will, I'll let Shane cover the rest as far as school bus utilities, that sort of thing goes.
I guess she's passing it on to you, Shane.
As far as infrastructure goes for the subdivision, some of the infrastructure is in place, some yet is needed to be completed for previous sections. Stormwater drainage, sanitary sewer, and road construction. Section 4 and Section 1 is primarily completed. As far as the public infrastructure proposed for this subdivision, that's being updated from the previous Schefter's Farm subdivision, which done back several years ago. Previous items that are need to be completed. We have a list of those from the previous sections, and those will be sent to the developer in conjunction with this proposal. As Courtney indicated, there's 3 different streets that are 35 feet back to back in width, and that they wouldn't have parking allowed on both sides. Stormwater detention for the subdivision is included in Section 4, which does have a water quality aspect to it, and that those plans have been previously approved for the subdivision. Sewer is also proposed to extend to all the different lots within the subdivision proposals for Section 5. No off-site easements are necessary in this section for any of the infrastructure. As I had indicated, sidewalks proposed along all sides of sidewalks is proposed along both sides of all the streets in the subdivision. Fire hydrants, street lights, and utilities are all proposed within the subdivision and would be needed to be in accordance with our city requirements. The status of the review, as far as on the public works end, we've done a preliminary review of the infrastructure plans and of the plat, and we'll have some additional technical comments that will be forthcoming as soon as possible back to the consultant. We would recommend on the public works side approval, subject to those technical comments being addressed with both the final plat and the improvements. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Shane, thank you, Courtney. Do any commissioners have any questions for Courtney or staff? Shane? We will now hear from persons who would like to present the case. Please come forward. The microphone will be your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Trump from Central Missouri Professional Services. I'm the engineer on the project, representing Treehouse Excavation, who owns the property. This is the final phase of the residential side. It's going to be 49 lots. You guys already approved Section 1 and 4. Once we get this approved, if it gets approved, establish 1 and 2 bedrooms, or 1 and single and multi-family homes be built middle of town. So much needed in Jeff City. So for the most part, everything's fine. Some of the infrastructure, like Shane said, was built beforehand. So it'd be nice to have this done to finish everything off. Traffic study was done way back in 2005. There was no impact on that. For the most part, everything else seems cut and dry. Don't we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
On the stadium side, And then that's one entrance, and then the other entrance is off of Frog Hollow, right?
Not far, no, it's
Or
Creek Trail.
Yeah, yeah, they keep changing those names. Anyhow, the side that's over there on Stadium,
Yes,
you've got that intersection there with Satinwood where Brandy comes out. So you've got that traffic light there, and then you've got the traffic light down at Edgewood and Stadium.
Mhm.
And I actually bank at Mid-America, and I go there all during the day, and that is a high-traffic area. So do you anticipate there being any issues with people getting in and out of there, or that affecting the traffic flow?
Really can't say too much because the study was done before I was there. It's back in 2005 when the proposal was originally done. And they went and did a traffic study at that time. It didn't seem like it was going to affect enough to make any other concerns. Since they do
So
have.
that was way before Mid-America Bank was there, or
Yeah.
before, well, I don't
But
know, when the medical
I
building.
think they proposed that when, they expect that to be built up at the time, that's part of the traffic study. And the fact that they do have two entrances, if it is traffic jam, they would go the other direction, so. But, since I didn't see the traffic study, I can't really tell you offhand.
It just seemed like it would be adding traffic to a already busy situation. So there's always gonna be that other way to get out.
Yeah, but that's the nice thing about it, since you got multiple exits and entryway, if it is high traffic, I feel most of them will go the other direction if it's an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Well, I live in that neighborhood and I'm often on Stadium at Edgewood. I would disagree that turning left from Stadium onto Edgewood to go east is never a problem. I come down Satin and Brandy and to that intersection, and I would anticipate that the traffic study that was done in 2005 is probably still an accurate depiction as to the traffic as it exists today.
Yeah, most of the traffic studies, they assume future development on it. So, I'm assuming at the time they would have took that into consideration. And the fact that we do have, most outlets don't have, subdivisions only have one outlet, so they do have multiple outlets here. So if they want to take a left turn in one way, they might go the other direction. So I really don't see it being too much of a problem or issue.
Somebody have any questions?
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Is there anyone else who would just like to speak on this request? Seeing none. Okay, seeing none, we will now close testimony. Courtney, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. So the site elements of this particular final subdivision plat have been reviewed with respect to chapter 33 of the subdivision code and chapter 35, the zoning code, and all site elements will be sufficient and code compliant. Staff recommends approval of the final plat with the conditions that technical comments be addressed and that there be a submittal of finalized plat prior to city council introduction. And so there's a single form motion with those two conditions, and again, this would be introduced on May 6th. And it would be here in City Council chambers at 6 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Of course. And Shane, you pretty much gave your staff report. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Do any commissioners have any questions for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to recommend approval of the final subdivision plat of Ridgecrest subdivision, section 5, with the following conditions: to address the technical comments from the city staff and submittal of the finalized and signed plat prior to introduction to city council on May 6th.
Second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to case number 2. That would be the Boonville case.
No, it's not. No.
Maybe this center. Geez, I cannot get it right. Sorry. I wrote it down. Okay, moving on to the Trade Center Parkway case. Courtney, would you please present the case?
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. So this property is zoned PUD plan unit development, and adjacent zoning is as follows. To the north is PUD with there being vacant land. To the east is zoned PUD with there being a proposed, or there was a 10-unit apartment complex, which you all heard fairly recently for that multifamily development. And then to the south is zone PUD and M1 light industrial with there being vacant land. And then to the west is unincorporated out there in Cole County with there being single family residential use. Here's a closer up aerial image of that site, and the nature of the request is that they're requesting a preliminary PD plan for the Stronghold Lane View multifamily residential development. And this would consist of 2 to 3 stories based off the terrain. And the zoning history for this property is that there was a preliminary final subdivision plat in 2010 that was approved, and then a rezoning which zoned this to PUD was approved in 2017. The policy for the commission is that you all would review the preliminary PUD plan, then give a recommendation, which would then be passed on to City Council. Here's an image, a visual that was submitted by the applicant for that proposed multifamily residential development. And it includes 2 buildings, so it is in total would be 4-unit apartment complex, but it is broken up into 2 buildings, each would have 20 units, and each would have a parking lot, so it would loop off of Trade Center Parkway, form that U-shape, circle this out. And then here's another it's just without the aerial on this, but just to briefly cover a few details before they do have a lighting plan, which is should be included in the case packet materials. Again, they met their parking requirement, and the sidewalk is signed to be located near the community building just before that ingress there above the first floor of the building. And then on to the next plan this is the landscaping plan. They have proposed a buffer for the west side of that development. And you do have also trees for around the parking lot area. And so this is another visual that was seen by the applicant. This is an elevation of that building, which includes the front elevation and the left side elevation. And so again, this would comprise of 2 stories. The north side would have 3 stories, south side would have 2 stories, and then they are proposing brick veneer and vinyl siding for the exterior of the building. Here's another elevation just covering the opposite elevation, so the right side elevations. And then just a couple more visuals, just a few renderings of what that would look like, what it is proposed to look like. And then here's another similar image, just a different view of that proposal. And that's some initial information on that request. Is there any questions?
Any commissioners have any questions for Courtney?
Mr. Chair, I'll give just a little more background because there is a little bit more history. You referenced a rezoning of the property back in 2017 and a subdivision plat of the property, I think, back in 2010. So the history, how this area kind of shaped, was in 2010. The development plan was for a light industrial development, and Trade Center Parkway is constructed for that purpose with a number of lots platted off of that. The properties were marketed for a number of years and with no success in selling or development. And so the property owner at the time partnered with another agency to propose a multifamily apartment building there, seeking MHDC, Missouri Housing Development Commission, tax credit funding at the time. And so in 2017, they brought forward a proposal to rezone the property to a PUD, a planned unit development. They could have pursued a multifamily property, but the PUD district allows for more restrictions if necessary. Ability to address concerns of surrounding property owners, if appropriate, within that process. And so that's the process they pursued. At the same time, they proposed a rarely used, what's called a concept PUD plan process for this property. They applied for a concept PUD plan for this site, proposing basically the same development, 40-unit apartment building. The concept PUD route, its purpose is to establish the use of the property and density of the property. So it's kind of a preliminary step before even the preliminary PUD plan, whose purpose is to lay out the site. Okay. And so in 2017, they were successful in that they approved, through the Planning and Zoning Commission and by the City Council for that concept PUD plan, the use and the density. Okay, but they did have site plans attached to that application. They wanted to be very upfront as to what was being proposed. There was significant public comment at the time, but was successful in its application. They were not successful in receiving MHDC funding. And then came back, in fact, some of the funding mechanisms at the state level went on a hiatus for a number of years, but was reestablished, I think, last year. They pursued funding at that time. They were not successful. They reapplied this year. They were successful in receiving MHDC funding. They've always known that this was the next step, at the city level in order to pursue approval of the actual, PUD development site plan. And so that is what is before you today, is that specific site plan. But the history of it is that it was, presented to an extent back in 2017. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has on that.
Any questions for Eric or staff? See none, we will now hear from persons who would like to present this case. Please come forward and state your name and address in the microphone.
Kyle Miller, 1000 West Nightfall, Columbia, Missouri.
If you touch that button, it will advance one slide.
Okay.
Touch that button, everything will get messed up.
Okay. And where do I point? Anywhere?
Yes.
Try it.
Yeah, you can try it.
That'll work. There we go. All right. Good evening. I'm here before you tonight for a request for a preliminary plan unit development called Stronghold Landing. I am Kyle Miller with Crockett Engineering, civil engineer for the project, representing Lohman Investments LLC as the property owner and HRM Services the developer. So an overview of the project: we are a little over 3 acres on 3 platted lots, which is part of the Jefferson City West Commercial Park, which you just heard the history of. It is zoned correctly as PUD with an RA2 underlying zoning, and that zoning does allow for multifamily use, which we are asking for. There's 40 total units, which is comprised of 2 3-story residential buildings, 3 on the low side and 2-story on the high side. So 2 total buildings, 2-story on one, 3 on the other. In addition to that, we'll have a community building, pavilion, and playground. This development will meet all of the city's codes and regulations without asking for any design adjustments. So you've already seen this rendering, but this is an overview of the project. Our area are the 3 lots, which are hatched with PUD surrounding on all sides except for the west, with the neighborhood to the west. Here's an overview of our site plan. 2 buildings that will be our 40 units, 20 in each. Community building and pavilion to the north, parking between, and then a looped connection to allow for fire safety, fire access, and apparatus to use, as well as for the residential use and trash services. All right, a couple items I want to hit on tonight. Jefferson City's comprehensive plan, the existing infrastructure already in place, stormwater, as well as landscaping. All right, so here are a few of the items within Jefferson City's comprehensive plan. So I'll read each one and then go through how this development does meet each one of these. Housing and neighborhoods, this bullet point is to enhance Jefferson City's housing environment, catering to the diverse needs of its residents, provide residential needs for the area. So that's exactly what we're doing here. We're providing housing for the area. Land use, create robust commercial employment centers, maintain responsible, practical, and resilient growth. So the land use for this, we have neighborhoods to our west, north, we have industrial to our south. So what we're doing is we're creating that mixed neighborhood feel right between the two. Additional land use, we feel this is a good use for this property, creating the apartments and places for residents to have homes. Economic development, enhance Jefferson City's workforce opportunities. Modine, as well as other industrial facilities, are within a mile of this. So not only will it be for those particular jobs, but any other residents or any other applicants and residents of the area. Environmental resiliency, that word always gives me, I apologize. Utilize infrastructure to support the existing population and meet the needs. So as you already heard, a lot of the infrastructure is already in place, and that's what we'll talk about next, the existing infrastructure. This is an infill development. We're not going to an open field and starting over. This development is already in place. The street's already there. The infrastructure's already there. We're just wanting to continue at this time. It's a previously developed land, previously platted property. There's water, sewer, electric, stormwater, all on the site, all ready to go. The street is already built. We're just tying into it. The street Tradewind connects to Old Loman, connects to Bighorn, connects to 50. It's all already in place and able to handle the traffic. Infrastructure is ready to go for this development. And so here's the same rendering you've seen, but on the west side is where the sewer is. Water is on the east side within the right-of-way of the road. Electric's on the west side as well, and stormwater is to our north. That leads us into stormwater. This facility will use a regional detention facility, which has already been constructed and is located on the north side of this development. It is sized for this and properly handle the development. In addition to that, we will also be meeting the city water quality requirements by installing specific EMPs, and all of this will be reviewed by staff later as we present and move further with this development and construction plans. Next, landscaping, buffering. In addition, we'll adhere to all of the city's landscaping and code requirements. That would include parking lot landscaping or additional buffering. As mentioned in the report, there is a 50-foot wide open space buffer on the west side of the property to create that buffer from the neighborhood on the west side. So we will not be creating any pavement, no drive lane, no parking lot, no building in that open space, but we will be installing a wood privacy fence for the residents as well as planting additional trees in that area. And here you can see it's kind of what I'm talking about. On the west side of that drive lane, that's the 50-foot line, and there's no pavement, anything on that west side except for some additional trees and that privacy fence. Here's a rendering of the community building. The community building will have a computer lab area, community space for the residents to meet and gather. This will also act as a storm shelter and be required to meet the building standards of those storm shelter requirements. Also have leasing office for the residents. Outside of the community building, we'll have an outdoor pavilion, picnic tables, playgrounds. Here is a rendering of the residential building. It will comprise of 2 and 3 bedroom units. Again, here's the elevation, which shows you the 2 stories on the high side, 3 stories on the low side. All residents will have washer, dryer, microwave, refrigerator, dishwasher, heating, cooling, so the whole works. There'll also be a fully sprinkled system, which will include and be for fire safety. Lastly, all first floor residences will incorporate universal design components as well as have a few full ADA units throughout the complex. So in conclusion, the usage of this development meets the intent of the zoning, provide adequate stormwater control. No additional utilities will be needed, no extensions are required, everything's already there, it's ready to go. The proposal is consistent with the goals and objectives of the city's comprehensive plan, and it comes before you tonight, recommendation with approval from staff without any design adjustments. So I'll be happy to answer any questions this time.
I have one for you. Given the storm shelter, you said the leasing office in the second paragraph. computer lab, leasing office, and storm shelter. What are the requirements for a storm shelter? Like, is it underground? Do you have like?
It's not. So essentially, not whatever the requirement is, and I don't know specific as far as the square footage, but it will be built out of a masonry block.
Okay.
And then if there's any additional that's not within that masonry block, will just be a wood structure. But it would be, I think it's FEMA regulated, it's FEMA design is where I think it comes from. But it's a masonry block that has to withstand, the tornado wind speeds and all of that, as well as have the bathrooms inside of that storm shelter and a large square footage for all of the residents, if not additional guests as well.
And I'm assuming there probably will be some additional roof structure type.
Right.
There.
Yeah. So it would meet all that code requirement that would require to be classified as a storm shelter.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So do any of the commissioners have any questions for?
I have one. Just curious, what is the rent? Do you have any idea what their starting rent is?
I don't know on that. As civil engineer, I'm not privy to that information, so
I'm just curious. All right, thank you.
You bet.
Actually, I was curious about the number of bedrooms you anticipate in these units.
So it is 40 units, and it's 2 and 3 bedroom units. So.
That's right.
Okay.
You want to?
Hi, I'm Pete Ramsell. I've been to several public meetings over the years. I've been involved in this project from day one, all the way back to 2017, was it?
So.
And have a great relationship with Jason Otzke and the trust, his family. To answer your questions, there's 32 bedrooms and 10 3-bedrooms. And the rents, there's a range. The 2 bedrooms will rent from anywhere from $480 to $750. The 3-bedroom will be $550 to as high as $850.
It's affordable.
Excellent news.
It's affordable housing.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, yes.
Not a question, but a comment. This is a wonderful project. I mean, you all have spent so much time on this, and I really just want to commend you for all that you're doing, especially how you've looked at the comprehensive plan and everything that you put into this. This is
Thank you.
really, really good project, so thank you.
We've had 5 or 7 years of trying or more. We finally maybe got it right.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate those words.
Any other questions before I step away?
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this request? You would give us your name and address.
Sure. Good evening, I'm Darren Priest. I'm the Executive Director of Central Missouri Community Action. I live at 1436 Coach Lamp Court in Columbia. Just to sort of build on that good feeling, in addition to the plan we just heard about, the housing study that the City Council commissioned a couple of years ago clearly outlines a need for all kinds of housing. So we're trying to fill a part of that need. Central Missouri Community Action will will be providing supportive services for all the tenants and make sure that everybody's happy with the project overall. And happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Is there? Sure. When you come up, we'll just give us your name and address. For the record.
Hi, my name is Adriana Juarez, and I live on 1208 Grandview Court. I'm right behind the infrastructure that you're building. I was wondering, is this going to affect any of the houses surrounding it? Like, is it going to raise up the rates? And are we going to be part of the city now?
I guess would that be more of a city question there? I would say that, go ahead.
You said you're on Grandview?
Yes, I'm on Grandview Court.
Yeah. As far as.
I try to be very cautious on answering questions during a public hearing, but if you're okay, then I will.
Sure.
You say on Grandview Court?
Grandview Court.
So the proposal is located in the city limits. You are located outside the city limits. There's no amendment to the city limit line that's that's being, proposed anywhere within this. So no, you would still be a county resident, not a city resident. So in terms of effect on that area, it was pointed out that, well, one, there's a number of utility lines, overhead electric lines that go through that area. And so some of that is not really usable from a development perspective because of that. But they are proposing, flipping through a lot of slides here, that row of trees and a fence along that line, plus what's called an open space buffer, so a 50-foot wide area of no development. So they're backing away from that property line a fairly significant amount. So you could interpret a lot of that to mean that the impact, on that neighboring property is largely mitigated by all of those measures. So very minimal.
And in the area, they are aware that animals live there, and if they do push through that area, are the animals going to come to our residents, or are they going to spread out?
What kind of, like?
Deer
Migrate through their area a lot. And are you going to protect the residents because there is a lot of ticks in that area?
So, regarding that, that is not a zoning type of of regulation, and so I'm not sure I can respond to all of that. Deer will travel where they travel. I don't know if this is going to force them one way or another.
All right. So no part of city limits, off city limits.
What was that statement?
I'm asking it, we're not gonna be part of city limits.
The Grandview's not, no.
Okay.
No, cul-de-sac is not located within the city limits. And so the zoning map shows zoning, but zoning only applies within the city limits. You'll see the Grandview Court does not have a zoning district on it, so it has no zoning regulations.
Appreciate you coming and expressing yourself.
Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition on this request? Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Seeing none, we will now close testimony. Courtney, staff report.
Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, I'll go ahead and get
Sure, go ahead.
away. I think Mr. Miller had covered most everything that my staff report addressed as far as the infrastructure and the site. As far as, I will add a couple of things as far as the stormwater quality treatment and the erosion control plan. That'll have to be incorporated as a part of the final plan. In addition, as far as the drainage from the lot to the south, Lot 6, when the subdivision was laid out, all the drainage that would be directed from this section, one of the subdivision would need to go to the detention basin, the regional basin for that portion of the subdivision. And so this development would need to accommodate that drainage from the adjacent lot in order to get that routed to the regional basin. In addition, then sidewalk would be required along Trade Center Parkway for this development. As far as the improvements, the status of infrastructure, most everything has been installed as far as water lines, fire hydrants. I believe some sidewalk is still necessary to be improved in the subdivision. And then also street lighting, I don't believe is in yet. There may be some other type of utilities that were proposed as far as the infrastructure that may or may not be there that would need to be installed prior to the city accepting this street for maintenance. And at this time, that has not yet occurred. So we look to, since now there will be something proposed on this street, we want to make sure that that's been addressed as far as getting that street accepted, and everything else as far as the plan is in good order on the public works side of things. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Shane. Do any commissioners have any questions for Shane or staff? Okay.
Recommendation.
Yes, right. That's what I was getting. Sorry, seeing that, would somebody like to make a recommendation or Sorry. Someone else make it. Do you have something to add?
I'd like to make
You
a-
said?
Courtney does.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. I didn't even see you.
Okay, so the proposal is in alignment with the standards and intent of the zoning code and compatible with surrounding residential nature of the area. And the proposal must continue to meet all code requirements, including throughout site plan review and beyond. And staff recommends approval of the development with the following condition that there is an establishment of an underlying zoning district of RA2 for the purposes of determining future uses, signage, and lighting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I do have a quick question, actually. The plants that are gonna be used, I'm assuming those are a majority of evergreens, something that's, I didn't know if there was a specific plant that they were gonna
I
use.
believe it's a spread of different variety of trees.
Got it. Okay, do any commissioners have any questions for staff? No. Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the requested preliminary PUD plan for a 40-unit apartment complex with the following condition. Established underlying zoning district of RA2, high-density residential for purposes such as determination of future permitted purposes and standards for signage and lighting.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to case
So
number.
this will proceed to the city council with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation for approval. Be introduced on May 6th, but there is a public hearing in front of the city council on May 20th. And so if there's any members of the public that would like to comment on the proposal in front of the city council, that would be the date. Both meetings are here in the council chambers at 6 p.m.
We're moving on to case number 3. It is P24005, the 1131 Boonville Road rezoning. Courtney, Eric is presenting.
Yes, I'm going to go through and give a staff presentation on this case. It's a fairly complex proposal, and so I'll do my best to lay it out in its various pieces of what's being proposed. I'll point out first that there is a revised staff report. So we did make revisions to the staff report. So what, the revised staff report is within your printed packet that was handed out to you. That report is also available for the public on the sign-in sheet with the agenda. So the revision was from the previous staff report that was sent out to you electronically. So the only revisions were to the recommended form of motion, the recommended conditions at the very back of the report. So that's the only changes. We were updating that list. As the chair pointed out previously in the meeting, there has been a number of items of correspondence submitted on this proposal. And so each of you have that correspondence packet, and that's also been distributed to the applicant. So up on the screen is the location of the property, highlighted with the blue line. So it's located basically at the intersection of Boonville Road and Highway 179. It would be the southeast corner of that fairly large farm field, essentially right now. The current zoning situation is a bit odd. It has an RC, which is a conservation zoning district. It's a very rare district in Jefferson City. I believe it was put in place a number of years ago along floodplain lines at the time in order to establish some sort of conservation district within the floodplain, or to essentially use it as a way to, through zoning, regulate floodplain. But of course, the city has adopted floodplain regulations, that in line with federal requirements, for floodplain insurance for the community. But that is the current zoning for the bulk of the property. Outside that, the yellow areas are zoned in RS2, which is a single-family residential zoning district. And so what's being proposed this evening is essentially a two-part request. One is a rezoning of the property to two different districts, and then the other is a PUD plan. So the rezoning is to rezone the bulk of the property to a PUD, a planned unit development, for the purposes of proposing a PUD plan. And then except for the very northeast corner of the property where there is a single-family home, and I'll point that out visually, which they're proposing a single-family zoning district plus to divide that off in the future from the bulk of the farm. And then the PUD plan, the purpose of the PUD plan is to accommodate a rodeo use. And then there's also some other, I'll use the term ancillary uses kind of underneath that associated with that. I'll go through that in detail.
I'm sorry, I missed the single family. Can you show me where the single family is again?
I'll have a visual, just a few slides.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
So I'll point it out to you.
Okay.
This is a current site aerial. I say current. It's the most current air photo that we could get. It's from Google Maps. The air photos that are within our GIS system are a little older. And so, well, Bunny, there in the northeast corner is the single family home. You can see it's kind of fenced in. So there's a bit of a yard area established for that home. So that is a fairly recent construction, just a couple of years ago. And then also, there was, a number of years ago, a small corral that was on the property, and that in its place has been constructed a very larger, actually the term would probably be arena in that place. And so this air photo was taken, when some of that was under construction. You can also see some grading work being done on the property within that area. And so this is a current photo of the property, site photo. And so you can see the arena. I'll point out a few features. There's a number of bleachers located, I believe 5 bleachers located there on the side of the arena. There has been some lights installed for this, so you can see. And then, of course, a gravel area has been installed around the arena. And then this is within your packet is the preliminary PUD site plan for the property. And so PUD plans are typically proposed, in order to accommodate, sometimes for property that's zoned PUD, where the site development has to go through a PUD process, or sometimes properties are proposed for rezoning to PUD for the purposes of accommodating very specific uses. PUD districts and PUD plans have the ability to have conditions, whereas normal zoning districts do not. And so the PUD plan approach is useful in being able to establish conditions for very unique uses. And so that is the route that they have proposed to this particular use, a rodeo. An alternate route that could have been proposed, a rodeo is essentially an outdoor entertainment venue type of use, something that would typically be found within, say, a general commercial zoning district. Okay? And so there are processes if a property was zoned, a standard C2 zoning district for a use such as this to be proposed. I believe it's a special exception process. If it was an indoor use, it would be a permitted use of a commercial zoning district. And so they could have pursued a commercial rezoning of the property, but of course it's being used as a farm, and they're still intending to use it as the bulk of it as a farm. And so propose this PUD route instead. So within your packets is a narrative that spells out the proposal. And then also the staff report, which is very lengthy, I believe going to 5 pages. touches on the various elements of the proposal, tries to give some background. And so I'll try to touch on some of the highlights that are contained within that report. First, here on the site plan again, is the house located in the upper right-hand corner. And Bunny, if you see there on the plan, you'll see the line where they're proposing that would be divided off in the future. And so that's where that zoning line boundary would be proposed as well, with the house being zoned single family and the rest of the property. And you see the arena shown on the plan. The arena, of course, is constructed. There's it has been constructed along with the gravel parking area being installed on the property. There's also a barn noted on the plan located right there, the mouse pointer on the screen. And so that's an existing barn on the property. And so within the PUD plan, so what's being proposed, there are no new structures that are being proposed. And so their PUD plan is essentially mirroring the existing situation on the property. The existing barn on the property is referenced within the document as being potentially used to support the arena. So they could have, use that structure as part of the use of the property as a rodeo. The driveway entrance, there's a driveway entrance existing right now, would be paved and so that's a city requirement that driveway connections be paved. But they are proposing for the rest of the parking area to remain gravel. So that would be a deviation from normal zoning code standards, seeking approval of a gravel parking situation. Now, there is precedent for situations such as that. It's typically proposed in situations where parking demand is less or is not a daily use. So within some of their documents, they're proposing this use would be essentially basically a monthly type of use. And so recently there was a small building across the river that's proposed as a farm to market type commercial structure that went through the Planning and Zoning Commission, if you'll recall, that also was proposing a gravel parking situation as their use is limited in terms of months of the year. So there are handicap parking spaces that are shown right there. And so those would be paved. And then there would be a paved walkway, call it a sidewalk, going from there to the seating area where the bleachers are located there on the side of the arena. No parking lot landscaping is proposed. That might seem kind of odd for us to have to point that out, but that is a requirement for parking lots. Again, they're proposing a gravel parking situation. Also, no sidewalks are proposed. Again, it might be an odd thing for us to have to point out, but as we approach commercial sites, we're always pointing out that where sidewalk is required by the sidewalk plan and where it may not be. And when associated with the PUD plan, we'd be calling that out, that it's a requirement there. And so the sidewalk plan does show sidewalk along both frontages of this property as being an item that would need to be installed. But again, they're proposing for that sidewalk not to be installed. Of course, it would be a fairly lengthy stretch of sidewalk on both sides. Now, within the text of the plan, it's noted that there's no alcohol sales that would be proposed within this. And so alcohol sales on site would not be a permitted use. In terms of food items, they do point out that prepackaged type foods, but then also the allowance for food trucks. And so whether it be prepackaged or having a couple food trucks on site. And they've noted a location, at least in the upper corner here, for food trucks to be located. Restrooms are proposed to be portable toilets. They do have some signage referenced within the plan, and Again, the recommended list of conditions, and we did have discussions with the applicant property owner. And so some of that has been amended, so I'll kind of jump ahead. Within the initial proposal, they were proposing a sign located at the corner of the intersection of Boonville Road and Highway 179. Both a permanent sign at some point, but also an allowance for temporary signage, banners such as. But they're retracting that, and that from the proposal. But they would be granted essentially within the recommended conditions an allowance of temporary signage along Boonville Road, and I'll go over that within the conditions. As mentioned, there is lighting that is already installed on site. They did provide a metric plan, and so that's a plan that's put together by a lighting engineer in order to display graphically how bright the lights would be on the property. And so that is this visual right here at the bottom of the screen. It's a little hard to read, but those are foot candle levels spreading out from basically, I kind of interpret to be about 4-foot candles directly underneath the poles. And then each line is 1-foot candle out until you get to the last line, which is representing 1/2 of 1-foot candle. That's what's represented here. Many of the commercial standards, or commercial parking lot standards for lighting are kind of cap out at about a 4-foot candle level within the zoning code. There is regarding noise, and so they have installed a speaker system, and would use it for announcing at rodeo events, okay? And then also use it for like music. Again, it's capable of playing music during non-rodeo events. Again, I'll go through some of the different uses that are kind of laid out within the staff report here in a moment. In terms of parking for both participants and spectators, again, there's a large gravelled area that would be for parking, and then any overflow parking that would be proposed for the farm field to the west of the property, so located between the arena and parking area and Highway 179. Of course, there's a creek going through the property, so it'd be on the other side of the creek, this area right here. I can kind of show that on this area right here for overflow parking.
How would they access that?
I believe there's a driveway connection there, but I'll rely on them to go into more detail. We try to lay out traffic within PUD staff reports as just kind of a base item that we provide staff comments on. In this case, it's a little hard to judge what a traffic generation would be, but I'll point out that typically when we're presenting that information to you, what we're referencing is peak hour traffic. And the primary reason for that is to address the safety concern of traffic. So not necessarily more vehicles going through a residential area. The purpose of our look at that is to see if the street network is capable of handling traffic. With the threshold that I routinely reference to you, being 100 peak hour vehicle trips is the threshold for doing a site-specific traffic impact analysis. Okay? And so, I apologize for kind of going into detail here, but hopefully to answer some traffic questions. So like a typical fast food restaurant would trigger that traffic impact analysis because it's generating a lot of traffic during rush hour. Okay? Whereas a church, for example, that has even a greater number of traffic, but it's producing that traffic at an off-peak time, not during rush hour, is likely not going to trigger that traffic impact analysis requirement. Obviously the Public Works Department and the engineers look at traffic situations in all site plan reviews. Again, it's a little hard to quantify what the actual traffic demand for this site would be. And when it comes time for the applicant and their consultants to present this project, there should be some reference to what they expect some of these attendance levels to be. Okay. And I'll touch on the uses a little bit. Again, getting into the staff report, there's a color image that's somewhat colorized within the staff report. Give me a chance to get to it as well. Looks like that. And so in terms of use, we've kind of broken down what they're proposing into several different categories and kind of incorporated that within the recommended conditions so that it's somewhat clear as to what the uses would be approved if ultimately this proposal is approved at the city council level. So I'll go through each of those. At the top, it's kind of a tiered structure. So at the very top of that is that outdoor rodeo use. Okay, so full rodeo use, advertised to the general public, publicized, and available for the general public to come in and be a spectator for. And they're proposing that to only occur once per month. Okay. And then we call it out as a barrel racing, but really it's rodeo event-related practices. So they routinely would be inviting, I'll say members of the public, but we're talking rodeo enthusiasts, rodeo participants to come practice at the facility. And they're proposing that, at a maximum frequency of once per week. References, Wednesday night barrel racing or something to that effect. And then the next tier down, a tier for training and lessons. And so this would be more one-on-one training with individuals or small groups, teaching them how to ride horses, for example. And again, just basically on demand. And then, of course, the agricultural use for the rest of the property. And then also embedded in that is personal use. And so the property owner does live, on site. And so, would have this arena, to use for their personal use. And, if they want to, to use it for roping cows and et cetera. And again, I rely on them to go into more detail on what that might involve. Mr. Chair, I hope that's a fair overview of the proposal to at least kind of set the stage for what it is that's in front of you this evening. I rely on the applicant and the consultant to go into more detail. It might be fitting because with this PUD plan, we have a very large number of recommended conditions. And so it might be fitting after their presentation to go through that list of conditions and give myself an opportunity to describe them. And again, set the stage for the public hearing and members of the public who want to comment on this proposal, including possibly that list of conditions. And so I'm happy to answer any initial questions.
I do have one. Eric, in the narrative, the plan narrative, there's reference made, it says, unfortunately, when a public facility was proposed, when does a piece of property become public?
Okay, and so as you'll note, a lot of this construction has occurred. Okay, I won't go into the strict details on all of that, but in general, if somebody wants to, install a corral of sorts on their property, there's nothing zoning wise that they're in violation there. A violation, occurs when it's being proposed for a use that it's not zoned for. So in this case, when you're inviting the public and it becomes a commercial enterprise, on the property, okay? And so there were a number of events that were publicized, and so there was a fair amount of communication between city staff and the property owner regarding a lot of that. That's not necessarily an item for what's in front of you today. What's in front of you today is to position this property so that it can be used for those purposes. I hope that's a fair answer to your question.
I'm just thinking outside the box, if they were to have 1,000 friends over, and have a rodeo among themselves and not charge anybody anything or bring any food trucks, and they could raise as much noise as they want, would there be any kind of violation?
Yeah, again, a lot of that, would probably be a staff interpretation. It could be interpretations that are not necessarily at my pay grade. But, someone inviting 1,000 friends over for a Super Bowl party every week is surely an issue. And so, in its place, I don't think that that's something that would be permitted by zoning. And also, certainly, the act of inviting that many people is essentially inviting the public. And so that's where, it is important to understand that embedded in this, as I referenced, is, personal use of the property. How many friends is too many? I don't know the answer to that. But there certainly would be an allowance for, as proposed, personal use, of the facility. And so, again, the applicant may be able to address some of this.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay. We will now hear from persons who would like to present the case. Please come forward to the microphone and give your name and address for the record.
I'm Brian McMillan with Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. And I think it's safe to say in my almost 30 years of doing this, this is my first rodeo. So, it's not my second though. I do have a second. Ironically, at the beginning of the year, I was working for the state on a new rodeo arena at the state fair. Of course, this was a 6,000 to 8,000 seat arena that they're proposing to build there. So this is definitely not on the level of that. We had rodeo experts from Texas working on this, and so huge holding corrals outside and big paved areas for semi trucks to come in. So this is definitely a smaller thing. I don't know if anybody ever remembers the old J-Bar H rodeo in Camden. I remember going there as a kid. I don't think this is on the level of that even. So, but just to give a little history, Mr. Higgins, and I'll say Jay Higgins is here and his son also. Should you have questions, they'll be able to answer more of the operation of the facility. He came to us almost about a year ago with this. I think he didn't realize what all needed to be done to permit something like this. There was a lot of work going on. The city staff noticed it, and there's issues with getting in the floodplain and that needed to be addressed. And so that's where we kind of got involved. And we had hoped to have this brought to before the Planning and Zoning Commission probably within at least 6 months ago, but it kind of got pushed off, and they rethought what they were wanting to do. And then I got busy with different projects, and it was hard to get to. So now we're trying to talk about this now before the summer season starts up, because I know they would like to host some rodeos at the facility. But normally I like to bring some visuals to hand out for you to look at. But as Eric mentioned, everything that's proposed has really been built already, except for the new entrance. And we do propose a new concrete entrance. And the existing entrance out there is a field entrance, and they can get their vehicles in it as needed with trailers and whatnot. But with emergency equipment that might have to go to the facility, it is good to widen that entrance and pave it to meet city code. So we're definitely doing that. And just talking about a few of the things like traffic. I don't know if I can even nail down how much traffic. I don't anticipate, I'm sure at 10 o'clock at night when the rodeo ends, everybody's going to be leaving once, and so there may be a little traffic, but there's no other traffic at that time generally in the public, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. And I'm sure people will show up to the facility, not all at once. Everybody will kind of come in at certain times. So it's kind of hard to nail down a good traffic count, and there's really not a whole lot in the traffic guides that we use for traffic counts to really come up with a good number for that. But anyway, sorry, the allergies are getting me, I think. But we do propose the gravel parking lot that's out there will remain in, it's a very low volume parking lot. It's going to be big trucks and trailers using it mostly, and it's a parking lot like that is fine for them, and using them once a month or maybe once a week, I don't think it's going to service that really good. And I don't think it rises to the need of having a paved parking lot. And once we pave the parking lot, then we're looking at stormwater quality issues and different things like that. It's running into the creek that's right there, having to deal with those issues. Whereas the gravel parking will allow it to kind of filter through and go into the ground a lot better. So, I don't think anything else. The signage issue was touched on. We did talk about a sign, but it wasn't really required. It just in case they wanted it. So a lot of these issues, we met with city staff and went through and made out a detailed list of what we thought was reasonable for this facility, and something that we hoped the neighborhood would be okay with. And since then, since it's been made public now, some of the neighbors have talked to the city and revised that list a little bit, and the owner is okay with all those things and agrees with them. So that's kind of where we are right now in that. And in regards to the rezoning, I think Eric touched on that pretty good too. He wants to split off the property. The yellow area will be the residential zoned area, and then the orange will be the PUD. Now, just so everybody knows that may not realize what a PUD plan is, it specifically defines how this property can be used. So we can only do what's on this plan. And so if he decides, I need another arena across the river or something, well, we can't do that without coming back here. And I think he realizes now that we need to do this before we start construction. So, but the orange area is the PUD, and you can see the previous project had a 50-foot buffer zone. We're talking hundreds or 200, a couple hundred feet of buffer zone on this project. So we have a long ways to the property lines. And I know that project didn't have a lot of noise issues or light issues, whereas this one might. But this one is only going to be used on a very minimal basis. So anyway, before I lose my voice, I may ask, is there any questions for me or any questions for the owner?
I just have a question. I mean, you mentioned the other project you were working on, how many seats? How many seats are in the?
Well, I think there's only about 4 or 5.
Yeah, there's 5 bleachers. 5 actual bleachers.
5 bleachers.
Yeah, 5 sets of bleachers, maybe like 4 or 5. Yeah. So it's very minimal seating, and I'm sure a lot of people will be coming, bringing their lawn chairs. I'm sure there's going to be people sitting on the other side where the holding pins are, and probably people standing up on the edge watching and different. I'm sure it's somewhat informal, but it will have a viewing area, and then there's a hill above that I'm sure people can sit on if they want to.
So all the entrances to the facility would be coming off of Boonville, correct?
That's correct. There's one entrance that will be improving where the actual arena is. And then there is discussion about the overflow parking area, and that's just a field entrance, and I don't anticipate that being used hardly at all. So we are not improving that entrance.
Is it safe to assume that the creek flows basically from the bottom right corner to the top left corner?
Yeah, it flows from where the houses are in the bottom
Down
right corner, and it goes up towards
railroad
Greenville
tracks.
Road. The Missouri River is at the top of sheet up there.
And the trains at Cold Junction there, that's not gonna present any kind of, I don't know, I don't live in that part of town, but I know the trains go through there.
No, the trains are kind of on the other side, and they won't present any issue for this, other than if the train's going through, the traffic kind of backs up a little bit. It might back up to Boonville Road. My daughter plays soccer, and we used to be out there all the time at the soccer fields, so I've been out there many times when the train has come through, so.
Any commissioners have any questions for Brian? Or
You might mention, what's the buffer between the corral area and the nearest home?
I have a dimension on there. I forgot to look at it. I don't know if we can see it on the site plan. It's at the bottom down there, but it's. I think it's 379 feet, looks like. About almost 380 feet.
no way.
Well, it's closer to his home than any of the homes.
So that's this house right here. Distance between it and the edge of the arena.
The one I had was to the south, but the one to the north could be a little bit closer. I don't know if I showed
okay.
on that one.
You were measuring this distance.
Yeah.
I would suspect that one's closer.
Yeah, probably so.
So probably less than that if that's what you measured down there.
Yeah.
Anybody else, any other commissioners have any questions for? Any questions for the applicant?
Oh, yeah, I did have one.
Okay.
I noticed you've referenced the 10 PM very specifically on several occasions. If this is a competition event, how do you ensure that you can meet that 10 o'clock deadline?
We want to have the applicant come up.
Yeah, that may be a question for them.
Hello, I'm Jay Higgins, the owner of the property. We had one, what I would call small rodeo, feature rodeo. We started around 11 o'clock and we finished around 8:30, which was last year. But we did put a deadline and we can put a timeline on events on when they start, whether it's calf roping, team roping, and schedule those at certain times of the hours to make sure we're completed and done by 10 o'clock.
So you can 100% guarantee that
Absolutely.
10 o'clock will be, that deadline will be met.
Absolutely.
Questions for that? Or for Ms. McMillan?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I mean, there was the reference, in order to get a better gauge on what the anticipated, traffic or number of people attending this event, that question could be posed to the applicant.
As far as the traffic, how many people do you propose, do you think that would end up coming to this event?
If we had a full-blown rodeo, which we have done scheduled for 2024, we'd be maybe looking around 50 people at max. Our weekday events, when we just do training, calf roping, we're under 20, 25 and way under.
And obviously with, more people knowing about it, it could increase.
It could.
I'm assuming you wouldn't be on the scale of like Ashland Rodeo, they have that, right?
No, this is definitely not a money-making proposition for what I'm doing with the city. I wish we had a before and after picture of this entire property from when I built my home, from the landscaping and all the fill that I brought in to the actual arena. And one other thing along with the creek, just FYI, we have a grant from the USDA that they're going to fence off the creek to make sure no animals, cows or horses have the ability to get into the creek. And that is supposed to be done, I believe, in July. So that has been completed as well. So, but the needs are, I had Special Olympics contact me wanting my son to, work with special need kids to, just maybe put a saddle on a horse, walk in the arena. A lot of local business people use the arena just to ride by themselves. And, I may not know they're there. They may call, send me a text, say, hey, Jay, can I go jump in the arena and ride? I'm like, have at it, have fun. But we just want to make sure we had all the paperwork proper and in place in case we did have a rodeo that brought 75 people, 50 people, or the weekly events where we do training, calf roping, and we have 25 or under people. We want to make sure we had all the proper paperwork and been transparent on it. And generally, we charge no admission to any of this stuff, so.
It sounds like really you're rodeo enthusiasts that there's not a profit motive, it's really for your own
Personal use.
education and gratification and.
And to help
Yeah,
kids,
it's like a big hobby barn, yeah.
It is, it's a hobby, and it's to help kids, and allow other family members that have kids in Jeff City that are interested in horses to actually have a place to go and ride. They like to Field of Dreams, we built it, now they're all built out, so.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you. Eric, did you want to make some comments?
Can I mention one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
One thing I just thought of too, I know we said everything's already been constructed, but we have been working with the city sewer department. There's almost all the mains for this side of town come right down through this, the Grays Creek Interceptor, it's called. And there's like 3 huge sewer lines that run through this property, and a couple of them parallel the creek and have been eroded. So the city will be coming in doing some stream bank stabilization to protect those sewer pipes. So if you do see construction out there, it's probably the city sewer department doing that. So just wanted to mention that.
Pump station located across the street. The pump station, the city.
Yeah, the pump station is actually over there on the left-hand side, and everything comes down to this area. And so anyway, that's all I have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So within your staff report, the revised staff report at the end is, again, under the recommended form of motion, a lengthy list of recommended conditions. And just above that, you'll see the staff analysis. I'll try to touch on that briefly. Approaching proposals such as this from 2 different angles. One is the commercial aspect. The additional thing, recreational or entertainment type of event being offered within our community could be pursued or perceived as a benefit. The property does have frontage on Highway 179, but it's also borders residential area and single-family residential area, to the south, to the east, and partially to the north. And so, embedded in that also is a realization that, essentially commercial use of this property has high potential for impact, on those adjacent residential uses. For those reasons, staff is essentially not taking a stance in terms of recommendation on this case. So you can perceive that as a neutral recommendation. But we have prepared a list of recommended conditions. And so that recommended form of motion, and I can go down it on the screen as well. Again, trying to lay this out so that members of the public can comment if they wish. First, it's a 3-part type motion. The first 2 parts would establish the zoning plan for the property, zoning the bulk of the property, the 18.65 acres, to PUD. And then that one single-family home and surrounding area, 2.82 acres, to a RS2, a single-family residential zoning district. And then the third motion, third part of the motion is the approval, pertaining to approval of the preliminary PUD plan for an outdoor rodeo with the following conditions. We've broken the conditions down in A. Okay. So item A would establish the permitted uses of the site. again, kind of laying out 5 different tiers. At the top, that outdoor rodeo use. Number 2, the rodeo event-related practices. Establishing a maximum total participants in that particular event of 25 people. Then number 3, the equestrian-related lessons in riding, such as one-on-one or small group riding lessons. Number 4, you're recognizing the use of the agricultural use of the properties, making sure that there's no misconception here, that they use the bulk of the property agriculturally, including for livestock grazing. And then number 5, we typically refer to an underlying zoning district, some other base zoning district to accommodate other potential uses. In this case, the RU, the Rural Zoning District, which is essentially our agricultural zoning district in Jefferson City, referencing that as an underlying zoning for any other potential uses. And then item B, putting some use limitations on those. And so number 1 there, pertaining to the outdoor rodeo events, limiting them to the months of May through October, with a limit of 1 event per month and a maximum of 5 events per year. And referencing that the event, any single event shall not exceed 8 hours in length. So if they were to start at 2 o'clock, they could go to 10 o'clock. If they were to start at 11, it would be several hours before 10 that they would have to end for this, this Item 2, the rodeo event related practices, again, limited to 1 event per week. That would not necessarily be tied to the May through October timeframe. The May through October is referenced only to the outdoor rodeo events. Number 3, all operations at the site shall end by 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays and 8:30 p.m. Sunday through Thursday evenings, with the key condition there being that the arena lighting and sound systems shall not be used after those times. They got to be switched off. And then item C is in reference to signage. And so the first reference is that no signage approved for that intersection of Boonville Road and Highway 179. It's referenced within the initial application materials. They voluntarily retracted that. So we would accommodate that through this condition. Item 2, temporary, giving them an allowance for some temporary signage. And so temporary signage, which could include directional signage for parking lots. Obviously if you're having some sort of event, it's helpful to have some sort of sign saying park here. Okay? But the total limit on that would be 25 square feet. It could be spread across multiple entrances, but a total of 25 square feet of temporary signage, which may only be placed the day of an advertised event and must be removed by the day after the event. So really tying that to the event timeline. And then a specific allowance for advertising signage on the arena fencing. If you've been to a rodeo, there's various sponsors for a rodeo. And so allowing for that advertising signage to exist on the fencing, okay? And so visually, go back, try to describe that. Again, kind of far off, or might be a poor photo here, but, attaching signs to the interior fence of the arena, advertising various sponsors. So having an allowance for that, but again, limiting that, again, item 3, allowing for that, but then limiting it that it must be placed, only on the day prior to the event and removed by the day after. It cannot exist there indefinitely. Item D is in relation to parking, and essentially, laying out what I've already kind of described. The vehicle parking being the gravel parking lot or the adjacent farm field to the west. The street parking would not be permitted. Now, I believe that street parking is already prohibited on both sides of Boonville Road for the frontage on this property, but making it very clear that it would not be permitted. Item E, restroom facilities. And so actually placement of the temporary toilets, porta-johns, placement of them in a very specific location on the south side of the barn on the property so that they're not visible from Boonville Road or the neighbors in that direction. Lighting. And so they did include that, again, that photometric plan, and the lighting is already in place right now. There's lights installed on poles around the arena right now. And also, I believe, a light on the barn. And so they've documented that within their submittal. And so the condition would approve that lighting plan, but state that basically no additional lighting could be installed. There's a reference that minor changes to lighting could be approved by the director. That's an item of convenience. If there was some minor change, having to go back through some process for something that's very minor on a site is a very troublesome endeavor. So allowing a little bit of flexibility at the director's level, being the Director of Planning and Protective Services. Item G, noise generation. So specifically referring to the sound system that's been installed. And so actually referencing Chapter 21 of the City Code dealing with nuisances. So the city has regulations regarding sound. And that if someone's making a sound of a level that exceeds what's allowed within Chapter 21, they're in violation of that code. And so essentially the magic number that I'll reference within that is 60 decibels. And so situations such as this, where you have a use adjacent to residential areas, you're permitted a 60 decibels up until the hour of 10 o'clock. Okay, and so referencing that is the maximum noise level that they could produce. They can produce that today, but referencing that there's not any deviation or any special allowances or deviations from that being approved within this PUD plan. And then again, also referencing that the lighting and the sound, the sound systems have to be shut off after the hours of operation referenced in condition B. We've tried to lay this out in a manner that could be considered, potentially amended, the list of conditions by this body in its recommendation to the City Council. And so, during the public hearing, or otherwise, there's desire by the commission to amend this. I'd request it be done in a very parliamentary type of setting, not on individual, so that we can come out with whatever's being proposed with I'll use the term clean motion, that's very clear to everyone on what would be approved, if that makes sense. And so I hope I've done a fair job of, again, describing the proposal and describing the recommended conditions. Happy to answer any questions prior to the public hearing.
Any questions? Mr. did a great job there. Appreciate it. Thank you for that. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this request? Is there? Your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Heidi Violet. I live on 3409 Country Club Drive in Jefferson City. I am a horse owner. My daughter is into horses. I grew up in doing 4-H and that sort of thing. I'm not into the rodeo side of it now particularly, but I have horses in town and the Higgins have been extremely generous in letting us use this facility on a few occasions. And so I've seen also some of the friends' rodeo practice coming over. And it's, what I wanted to say is that I also use Boonville Road all the time. I don't live very far from this, but it's in a low-lying area, and most of the residential areas up the street. This is kind of pretty close to the soccer fields, the train goes by, and then across the street's another agricultural area. So it's really pretty separate from most of the residential area in Boonville. There's really only one house that you can see kind of across the street, and it's more hidden from it's in the woods, so it's kind of separate from the residential area. But I think I was so excited when they started building this, because there is sort of there's always people who are interested in horses. They do a lot for youth. We obviously have this heritage in the country about riding horses, agricultural sorts of things. And it's really a wonderful opportunity for kids that's becoming harder and harder to find, particularly in this city. And this is kind of a nice arena, but it's not a high-use intended thing. And I think it would provide wonderful opportunities for more people to experience that because there is a shortage, and they've been, like I said, extremely generous about allowing people to use that. I was very excited to hear about the Special Olympics. There's a lot of therapy-related opportunities with horses. That and I've seen, it's just amazing because horses are very emotionally intelligent people, so it brings out a lot of positives for people who are able to experience that. I have seen, like I said, the rodeo practice. We had some relatives who were visiting from Germany, and I said, do you want to see some roping? And it was like the most unbelievable, like, oh, we could go see this. And so, like I said, it's not a big thing that they're doing there, but it's a really neat opportunity, and it makes it accessible to our community, and I think it's extremely positive. Like I said, it's not putting it right into a residential area. It's adjacent to it and it's near it, but it's, I think, in a good spot, and it's really on the edge of the city too. So I think it's a nice fit. So I wanted to mention those things, which didn't necessarily come up with the other comments.
Thank you. Any questions for? No. Is there anyone else? Oh, are you in favor?
I'd like to speak in favor.
Come on up.
My name is Bruce Brademan, and if you look at the drawing, I live just up the hill.
Your address, please, sir?
1028 Boonville Road.
I think it was getting to that, but.
And I live just up the hill from this. And I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's a great activity. I like rodeo. I always have. I want to speak to the noise. There's essentially no noise that comes from this except during the loudspeaker time. The trains, the soccer field, and the Bel Air School are the biggest noise generators in our neighborhood. And we can live with that. I mean, that's just great. And I like having somebody on the end of Boonville Road down there, you know, just keeping it alive and having some enterprise. So that's my vote in favor of.
Any questions for? No, you're good. Thank you. Is there anyone else present? Yeah, sure.
Hello. I'm Kristen White. I live at 1118 Boonville Road. So if you look at there, you can see my house literally on there. I'm the next house up from theirs. Our driveways connect. So I just want to say that we met with the Higgins on Monday night. They were very gracious. They listened to everything we had to say. That's where the amendments, I think, kind of came from. So I just wanted to put in there that they were very gracious in listening to us, and we're very happy to try to accommodate us for that, for sound and light and all of that. So I just wanted to add that in.
Any question for Ms. White?
My name's Pete Sneakers, 817 Boonville Road. I'm one of the previous owners of the property, and Jay mentioned the improvements they made. And they put a lot of time and effort into this and have dramatically improved this property, in my opinion anyway. I did attend the first rodeo they had, and there were people from out of state that came in for that. So not only that, I think it's a draw for Jefferson City to bring people in and expose them to something that's fun, and you know, it's a good time. So I'm highly encourage it. So,
any question for Mr. Schneer? No.
Hi, my name's Jim Convery. I live on 813 Boonville Road. And my father-in-law previously owned the property. He ran cattle on it for years. And like Mr. Cedars just said, dramatically improved the property. It's really, and looks fantastic. I know, born and raised in the city my whole life, and I've heard nothing about how can we get people, young kids involved to come back to the city. You know, it's stuff like this. This is what we need, you know. It's a small scale. I mean, it's pretty limited. You know, I don't see a huge impact on anybody. Pretty minimal requirements as far as, you know, once a month and once a week. I think it would be really easy to accommodate the people. The young kids, like he said, that was there was fantastic. I mean, it was just fun to see their excitement, and I just think it'd be a good asset for the city. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Sean Pieper, 717 Boonville Road. I'm in favor of this. They have, and like everybody said, they've made dramatic improvements to the area, to the piece of property. I'm also zoned as agricultural, and both families have worked in conjunction for over 100 years now. And we've tried to keep just a little piece of the country right there and try to keep the city from encroaching upon us time and time again. You know, as far as a lot was mentioned about traffic and things like that, I have not seen anything that they've done that has increased traffic any more than state workers every morning using 179 or Boonville Road as a cut through. And ever since 179's been put in, because I grew up, I've spent most of my life at this piece of property. And my grandparents and their parents, and we've been in the area a long time. So they're doing good things, and we work in conjunction, you know. I still have to, you know, show that I produce agriculturally on my property as well. They help me to do this as well. They bale my hay for me, and they do a great job. They're good people to be around, and I'm happy that, you know, we've come together. And like I said, in the last few years, they've done wonders with everything. So I'm glad to have them around, and, you know, I'll support them every inch of the way.
Appreciate it. Any questions for Mr. Peepers?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience that's in favor of this proposal? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this request. No opposition. Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this request?
Hi, my name is Tisha Spencer, and I live at 1140 Boonville Road. I live at the house closest to this area. 24 years ago, my husband and I bought 3.8 acres on Boonville Road, 1140, right across the street, and we built our forever home. We put a fire truck in it. That's how serious we were about that. We chose land inside the city limits because my husband's salary was supported by city tax dollars, and as a Jefferson city firefighter, we believed we should live inside the city limits and in a nice neighborhood with zoning and restrictions to protect our property value. Behind us is a large expanse of farmland and the train tracks, which we're well aware of. I got used to those after a couple of months being there. And in front of us was the 20-plus acres of rural conservation land in the floodplain, which we believed would not be producing anything else in the future because it was in the floodplain. So, and we believe this was a perfect spot for us. So I work very long hours from home. I sit by a large set of glass doors which overlook this property. The lights are level with the front of our home. The sound is very clear from my front porch. So I want to keep that in mind, that there are people affected by this. Mostly me, because I'm home all of the time, because I work from there. We've met with the Higgins, and I am trying to be very open-minded about the event space. I appreciate that Mr. Higgins met with us on Monday and discussed the guidelines with the neighbors, and I do appreciate that. Their proposal to use the space for the equestrian lessons and the practices is acceptable to me personally. The lights, the sound, the noise are all minimal. The recommendations are for those events to end at 8:30 since they're on weekdays. I have kids in school and we like to go to bed on time. Since using the space for larger regional rodeos one Saturday a month is a little more of an issue to me, as the large trucks, the trailers, the crowds stream in, the music, the announcing, the lights all disrupt our quiet neighborhood, and they bring up privacy and safety issues, as you can imagine when you have several hundred people filter in right across the street from you. And a rodeo is fun for the community, but I would guess most people like me would prefer that it wasn't right across the street from their house. I would prefer that these events not happen at all, but I'm trying to get along and be a good neighbor. And so I've agreed to no more than 5 events per year in that sort of spring to fall season. And I feel this is generous in an area that was obviously not meant for commercial use. I would ask that this PUD be very restrictive as proposed by staff. These are all things that we agreed on as neighbors. And that the recommended conditions be accepted to protect our peace and our property values here, as this could go on for many, many years happening this way. So I appreciate your time. Yeah.
One question for you. So I'm hearing what you're saying about kids in school, and I understand that, and I see the Sunday through Thursday end by 8:30. Is that something that you agreed to? Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, at least when the lights go down, the whole front of my home is not lit up past 8:30. My daughter, whose bedroom is in the front of the house, can get some peace from all of that and go to bed. Yeah.
Anything in these recommendations that have you agreed to all of these, or would you like to see anything changed?
No, we have agreed to all of those, and I do appreciate staff doing that. I wanted to reiterate how important those are to us.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to just speak on this request? Seeing none, we will now close testimony.
Before that, if there's any.
Oh, if we want to make any changes
has
to
any kind of statement to make. Doesn't have to.
With the way it's written, does anybody else have any?
No, I mean the applicant.
Oh, sorry.
I'll use the term rebuttal, but there is no one who spoke against.
Got it.
Just giving any opportunity for response.
Do you have any follow-up as far as that goes? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, sorry. It even says on my piece of paper rebuttal, but I didn't think there was a need for it, but all good to ask. Okay, now seeing none, we will close testimony and we'll, Eric, you will discuss.
Yeah, I'll finish it up. First, I'll pass off to my colleague, Mr. Shane Wade.
Yes.
I believe Eric and Mr. McMillan have covered the majority of my comments that were included in my staff report. I want to just briefly touch on if the preliminary plan would be approved by this body and by the city council, we would, got a couple of comments in regard to the final plan, some information that would be needed on that as far as we want to quantify that site distance for the new driveway to ensure that, especially with trailers and that kind of thing going in and out, that there's plenty of adequate site distance for that entrance. And typically that's seen on a construction set of plans, so we'd want to see that on that final plan. Wanted to point out that in our traffic parking code, no parking code schedule, that there is parking that is prohibited on both sides of, as Eric had indicated, on Boonville Road for the majority of the frontage of this property along the road there. Also, there is a fire hydrant that does exist on the frontage along the road, so we always try to check that to make sure that there's that available for fire protection. Also, as far as additional notes and details would be needed for that commercial entrance on the final plan, if the preliminary would be approved, there'll be a sanitary sewer manhole that'll need to be adjusted grade-wise in order to accommodate the new driveway. And so other details such as notification of inspection and that kind of thing when it goes in are included on those final plans. So other than that, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
It was mentioned previously that there was gonna be some city work done on the sewer lines that were exposed, I guess.
The wastewater division right now is putting together a plan for stabilization of some of those areas along that creek bank. We've got at least two different sewer lines that go through there, or trunk lines that go in and around the creek area. And we're wanting to try to make sure that those don't get undermined or exposed any further. And so that is ongoing right now. We're not let that out to bid, but we're trying to get that put together as quickly as we can.
Any other questions for Shane or staff? Okay.
I'll go over the planning side. And so Shane referenced, I just try to make sure it's clear that this is approval of what's termed a preliminary PUD plan. It would be followed up with a final PUD plan, but that final PUD plan is approvable at the city staff level. And we were to review it for all normal city code requirements. Some of the details that aren't necessarily shown on a preliminary PUD plan. This preliminary PUD plan would not be granting any deviations from city code outside of those items that have already been referenced as zoning code deviations. So all necessary fire code requirements, floodplain permitting requirements, stormwater requirements, et cetera, would have to be met. And so as Shane was referencing some items such as site distance, those are items that are usually shown on that final set of construction documents. This site's a little odd because they're not proposing any new buildings, whereas if it was a commercial building, there would be a full construction set being submitted to the city. But it would be followed up with that final PUD plan. Probably would be very minor changes and a little bit additional information shown on this information that's already submitted for the preliminary. I hope that's clear. That we do catch these the normal requirements on the back end, so to speak, with that final construction set. As mentioned, it wouldn't, this isn't granting any deviations from normal code requirements. The recommended form of motion, Mr. Chair, I can read it again so that it can then be referenced by anyone wanting to make that motion, or however you all would like to proceed, so it's very clear of what the motion is.
If you're saying read each motion and then.
It is customary to read the entire motion.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and do that, and then we would just reiterate that, I guess.
I can read it.
I got it too.
I can read it.
Okay. And so I'll just finish up. I think I've already given the staff recommendation on the case. We discussed the recommended staff conditions with the applicant. You heard that they're acceptive of those conditions. And so I'd be happy to answer any other questions the commission may have.
Any questions?
It is
three different motions.
As a single motion to approve the entire package, which is 3 parts, 2 rezoning and a PUD plan.
We got the pace yourself.
Don't hear that, it's a single.
Just go, single motion with, we can all read along.
All right, so who's gonna make the motion?
I move to recommend approval of the rezoning of 18.65 acres from RC Conservation and RS2 Low Density Residential to PUD Planning Unit Development, and recommend approval of the rezoning of 2.82 acres from RC Conservation to RS2 Low Density Residential, and I also recommend approval of the preliminary PUD plan for an outdoor rodeo with the following conditions. Permitted uses of the site shall be limited to the following: outdoor rodeo, barrel races and rodeo event-related practices, maximum total participants 25 people, equestrian-related lessons and riding, one-on-one or small group riding lessons, agricultural including livestock grazing, permitted uses of RU Rural Zoning District, Uses limitations as follows: outdoor rodeo events limited to May through October, which limit of 1 event per month of maximum of 5 events per year. Event length shall not exceed 8 hours. Barrel racing and rodeo event related practices limited to 1 event per week. Operation shall end by 10 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays and end by 8:30 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. Arena lighting and sound systems shall not be used after those times. Signage, no signage approved for the intersection of Boonville Road and Highway 179. Temporary signage, including any directional signage, limited to a maximum of 25 square feet, which may be placed on the day of an advertisement event and must be removed by the day after the event. Advertisement signage on arena fencing limited to signage typical for a rodeo arena, which may be placed on the day prior to the event and must be removed by the day after the event. Parking, vehicle parking shall be in the gravel parking lot and adjacent farm field to the west. Street parking not permitted. Restroom facilities, temporary toilets shall be located on the south side of the barn, out of sight of the Boonville Road and neighbor's view. Lighting, permitted lighting shall be as shown on the PUD planning with the minor modifications approved by the director. Arena lighting shall be used only during hours of operation as specified in above condition B. Noise generation shall not exceed allowances on Chapter 21 of the City Code. No exceptions from this permissible noise levels listed in Section 21 through 116A are granted with the PUD plan. Sound systems shall be used only during hours of operation and specified in above condition B.
I'll second it.
Nice job. I'll second it.
There was a few people.
There's all of them. Everybody's in favor.
Congratulations on the world record motion.
Did it.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
So this will be forwarded to the City Council with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation of approval. It would be scheduled for a public hearing in front of the City Council on May 20th. That meeting will take place at 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. Introduction to the bill will be 2 weeks prior to that on May 6th. And certainly if anyone has any questions, they can contact city staff. The way this would proceed to the City Council is the conditions that are being recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission be inserted into the council bill that would approve this PUD plan. And so staff will work to produce that council bill and place it on the City Council's agenda. And so those agendas are released typically about 5 days, I think, the Wednesday or Thursday or so of the week before the May 6th date. So anyone who wants to see the text of that can see it then.
So the introduction would be the preliminary PUD and then the final plan would be presented. Is that what you mean?
No. The introduction of council bills go through 2 meetings of the City Council before they can be approved. Okay. And so we term that introduction on May 6th and then it's eligible for approval on May 20th. But there's a public hearing that would occur on May 20th as well, prior to approval or prior to vote of the City Council.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any questions? No? Okay.
Other business.
Other business.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Staff updates on prior cases. I think there's 1 case in front of the City Council right now. That's for a 10-unit apartment building on Trade Center Parkway. We'll actually be shifting the public hearing date for that case from April 15th, which was the original date, to the first meeting there in May, that May 6th meeting. And the reason for that is an issue with the legal advertisement for that particular case. We're always very keen to make sure we're following state regulations on such things. So we shift that public meeting date. And I believe that action will take place at the City Council meeting. So. Other business, zoning code amendment discussion. So it has been a long evening already, but I have, as a kind of follow-up from the last meeting, try to put some information together regarding potential zoning code amendments. I'll use the term for residential sections of the zoning code. You can also refer to it as housing. And so what I was hoping to present to you tonight was a bit of an overview on some of our thinking and some of the plans that have been adopted at the city level or been commissioned at the city level with respect to housing. And there's two in particular, but I'd encourage the membership to go out and look at these plans that I'm referencing. So up on the screen is a screenshot of our website. Okay, this is the departmental website. And so the way you get to that is hovering over the word government. You get a drop down for department, hover over the word departments and find the Planning and Protective Services Department to get to that page. And then over on the left-hand side of the departmental page is for plans and publications. So that's what's being displayed for you here. There's two particular plans. I was going to give hopefully a brief overview on some of the content of them. One of them is the comprehensive plan, and so Activate Jefferson City 2040. So that is the planning document that was approved by this body several years ago. And it does have some recommendations contained within it with respect to housing and zoning code amendments, specifically. And so go to the screenshot of the front page of that. But in general, some of the things that are contained within the comprehensive plan that touch on zoning code amendments with respect to housing, include potentially amending the zoning code to promote more styles of residential living across the city. And there's some specific references such as more allowance for tiny homes, more allowance for accessory dwelling units. I think most people are familiar with tiny homes, very small homes. And they've been popularized by television. And you often see on television that they're on wheels. Okay? The reason they're on wheels is because they don't meet building code requirements. Okay, and that's I believe what some of the regulations there, or potentially even zoning code requirements of these communities that they're being proposed in. But there's all manner of tiny homes. You don't necessarily need one on wheels. Even building code requirements don't have specific, the way I understand them, it's not necessarily my field, but specific square foot requirements. But there are certain requirements that are based in life safety on how big a bedroom needs to be or something like that. And so you can kind of backtrack from that and come up with minimum kind of dimensions for a house. There is no lower limit on the size of a house that's permitted in Jefferson City today. And so we often get these phone calls, can I build a tiny home? Well, as long as you can meet building code requirements, yes, you can build a very small home on a legal residential lot, okay? And we sometimes get the question as to whether I can build a tiny home village. And the response there is very similar to a mobile home park. And that is that the city code, the zoning code actually references that mobile home parks have to be proposed within a PUD plan, okay? And so that's basically the same response for a tiny home. And so I don't necessarily want to go into great detail on any specific that I reference here, but I'm trying to approach some of the topics here and give some background. And so some of the other things, allowing for more residential units in commercial structures. Okay. There's already a lot of allowance for loft apartments and basement apartments in all commercial zoning districts, but perhaps looking if that could be expanded any further. Again, the comprehensive plan references, potentially amending zoning code to establish strict standards for conversion of single-family structures into multiple family dwellings. If you look at a lot of our older neighborhoods, you'll see various examples of how former single-family homes have been converted to multiple units. Some of them, very clean and good-looking. Some of them, kind of in the other direction. There's lots of examples to look at out there. And so, trying to establish some standards for those types of conversions. I'll be honest, we don't get a lot of requests for those types of conversions these days. I think they were more prevalent in days past. I believe, in my career here, I think maybe twice that it's occurred. Promoting the development of cluster and compact housing subdivisions. We do have some regulations. We haven't dealt with them at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but there are regulations for compact subdivisions contained within the zoning code. I believe the last time those came up in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission was about 2005, when someone was proposing a development such as that. Expanding multifamily uses in commercial districts. So within our C2 general commercial zoning district, we do allow for large apartment buildings, the threshold being 8 units or more. And so basically looking at maybe expanding that. And then utilize the mixed use zoning in more parts of the city. We have a mixed use zoning district that exists in very few locations, essentially mainly along Capitol Avenue. It's kind of the reason it was inserted into the zoning code to begin with, the mixed use 1 zoning district. We've discussed in the past having a second type of mixed use district, a mixed use 2 type district for more commercial areas with mixed use, for example, such as Dunkland and High Streets. Okay. Within the comprehensive plan on the map, the development plan map, there are some references to specific locations that should be looked at for some level of mixed, we actually term it suburban mixed use, and kind of defining that as a mix of apartment and office uses. And so we have some of that mapped, in specific locations where that might be appropriate. And so there is some information within the comprehensive plan regarding that. Those are some of the recommendations that I've extracted out of the comprehensive plan that are kind of specific to zoning code amendments. The next study I'll touch on is the housing study. It was even referenced this evening. It was prepared by a consulting firm, whereas the comprehensive plan was prepared in-house by city staff. But the consulting firm was hired to look at a wide range of different housing issues and give some information and some recommendations with respect to housing for the community. And so one component of this study is recommendations on zoning. And so I'll touch on some of the bullet point items there that I've extracted out of that plan. And number 1, review existing zoning districts and regulations to reduce barriers to housing production, such as zoning districts that allow for certain residential types by special permit versus by right. It's fairly common for cities to have zoning codes that are structured in a way where certain uses are conditional uses or require some sort of zoning process in order to be approved for a specific district. There's many types of commercial uses, of course, that go through the Board of Adjustment for conditional use permits. Occasionally, special exception permits come in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. With respect to housing, specifically multifamily housing, there are not a lot of those references within our zoning code. Our zoning code it's fairly well positioned, I'll say, with respect to when we look at other communities that have fewer different categories of zoning, and most of their multifamily references are contained within a single district. Like they have an apartment district and a single family spread of districts with very little in between those two. We actually have several steps between those. But essentially what that is referencing is looking at some of that by right zoning on where you can by right build multifamily developments. Review other zoning regulations such as dimensional requirements, open space requirements, height restrictions, lot area requirements, parking. I would refer to these as standards. These are the standards for development that are contained within the zoning code if someone is building a new multifamily development. What the setbacks are, what the density allowance for a property is, how many parking spaces are required. So doing a general review of those requirements, those standards. Consider permitting more multifamily use within commercial districts. And I suspect the consultants were pulling that straight out of our comprehensive plan. And so again, a reference to potentially allowing more multifamily uses in commercial zoning districts. Explore various incentives such as density bonuses, tied to affordability or ownership restrictions, that's a pretty complex recommendation. And we can certainly look at that. But it's, larger communities, and communities maybe in other areas of the country, things such as transfer of development rights, where a property can transfer its rights of development to another property, thereby creating an open space property, and then the other property having the ability to build more at a higher density, a taller building, so to speak. Okay. Things like that, those are mechanisms that are achievable within, within zoning codes and otherwise. And so, potentially using tools such as that to accomplish housing goals. Identifying barriers to development to 2 to 4 unit housing units. There's a nationally, within the plan, planning and zoning discussions, there's often this discussion about missing middle housing. And so it's a reference to those small housing units, usually between 2 to 4 or smaller number of units, as opposed to large apartment buildings or single family home, that middle area. And trying to, where a lot of zoning codes are overly kind of restrictive and don't allow for those types of housing units in very many locations. And so giving a review of that, I've already referenced that in Jefferson City, we have a pretty good, all references, pretty good structure of tiers leading up, single family to duplex to low, 4-unit buildings, large apartment buildings. So there's that kind of stair step structure within our zoning code, but again, giving it a review. Identify areas where the development process could be streamlined. So trying to reduce regulatory burden, or administrative burden on development proposals. And then I'll give some comment here. Many of the recommendations within this study are general in nature. In other words, they didn't necessarily give an in-depth review or a highly complex review of our codes and situation, when making recommendations. And many of the recommendations are, for the most part, kind of exploratory in nature, meaning the recommendation is to look at this, make sure that it's appropriate for your community or if changes should be made. So a little bit of staff commentary here. In general, these two plans give a kind of wide range of both zoning code recommendations, so areas to look at for potential changes. But then, there's also zoning map recommendations. And so, maybe identifying different, looking at your zoning map to see if it's structured appropriately. I'll say in general, at the staff level, we're not seeing major concerns from potential developers regarding the zoning code standards, okay? I don't get a lot of input or, commentary from developers, in reference to the kind of the standards, the setbacks, the density, the parking requirements, et cetera. I mean, there's still things that need to be looked at. And our goal would be to look at those, present this information to you. But at kind of the staff level, that's not necessarily where we believe that major improvements with respect to housing would likely be made. On the zoning map side, I will say that it's the opposite, that it is an area of persistent concern. Anytime a new property is being developed that has to go through a rezoning process, it has to go through that public process in order to get approval. It opens it up for a lot of comments from surrounding property owners and the city in general in terms to if it's appropriate for whatever use it is that they're proposing. And so in addition to that is the timeline, generally referenced as a 3-month timeline for a rezoning process. And so if you look at the available property in our community, which is not extensive, a lot of our property is developed out. And what remains, is often has, topographical, issues. Is not, a lot of, the city has been developed for many years, in general. There's not a lot of open property that is the most ideal property for development. That's already been built on. But looking at the map to see if the spread of zoning, where what property is zoned is appropriate, is something that needs to be looked at. And then also, again, an area that would be expected to have a greater impact would be amendments to the different districts and what is permitted in those districts. Referencing, possibly permitting more apartment and multifamily uses within commercial zoning districts would have a fairly immediate effect, as property that is zoned that way is immediately available for multifamily development without going through a public hearing process. And I'll also reference the PUD districts. We have a lot of property zoned PUD. PUD plans appear in front of you almost monthly. And so every one of those has to go through a public process. When asked, what can I use this property for? The answer is you have to go through this public process to get any kind of approval. And so when compared to other cities, I'll say that our zoning code is fairly well positioned with respect to a lot of these standards in the different spread of districts. But as I referenced, there's still a lot that can be looked at. And so our plan would be to try to present this to you, to give a very broad overview first of the zoning regulations as they pertain to residential uses. So that would be our goal first, is to educate, make sure it's clear what the various standards, not only from everything from single family on up to apartment uses, how we look at properties and what those standards are. And then next, to look at changes to those standards. Again, I'm usually referencing the like parking density, setbacks, etc. Then a second kind of tier within presenting to you is getting let out of line. Also presenting to you an overview of past zoning code amendments. So there have been a number of amendments in the past, dating back to even 10 or 15 years ago, some of which touched on some of the recommendations that are presented in these plans. So giving you an overview of some of those amendments and what the effect of them potentially has been. The next, providing some statistics on development trends. So trying to take information that we have and give it to you so you get an idea on where development is occurring, what type of development is occurring, what property there is available. And then focusing on items specifically referenced within these planning documents. Again, so the different categories of potential amendments I'll touch on. First, those amendments to the development standards. Again, probably not a very high impact, but looking at the setbacks, density, parking standards, and other standards. Then next, looking at the permitted uses in the different districts. Again, exploring possibilities of having different permitted uses in some of the districts. After that, establishing perhaps new categories of uses. I already described tiny homes, but then also accessory dwelling units. So an accessory dwelling unit is often referred to as a mother-in-law quarters. It's a separate housing unit on a typically single-family lot, much smaller, sometimes located above a garage or a separate building in the back. But currently, as our zoning code is structured, a separate a unit such as that would be interpreted as a separate single-family home, and only one single-family home is permitted per lot. And so it's not permitted today. And then potentially touching on map amendments, which can be some of the most difficult ones because they involve people's real property. And so if there's a rezoning of property to occur, then there's certainly a level of contact and discussion that needs to be made with the property owners in order to describe what's being proposed for their property. Hey, that's an overview. A lot of this is reliant on the amount of staff time that we have available in order to prepare this information and present it to you. It is a very high priority, and so it is our desire to continue bringing this back to you on a monthly basis, and working through some of these items in a discussion format. I'm certainly open to any discussion you have. There are other options. We could schedule a work session. We have not done that in a fair number of years. So an actual separate meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, often in a less formal setting, such as across the hall.
We've done it before, haven't
We did it for the comprehensive plan, didn't we?
we?
Yes, I think we did.
Yeah.
And so that is an option as well. Obviously it would need to be done and scheduled far enough in advance so that we are sure that we have the staff resources in order to put the information and make it a worthwhile meeting. It'd still be a public meeting, but typically that would be the only thing on the agenda. So we wouldn't be discussing this at the very end of a already long agenda. Also, we have some churn within our membership. So,
Yeah.
kind of trying to be cognizant of that as we spell out that I would like to present to the Planning and Zoning Commission, a fair amount of information, knowing that we'll likely have new membership in the very near future. I don't necessarily want to.
Well, not likely. I mean, we're losing two, so congratulations.
So, I don't necessarily want to delay this because it's, again, a very high priority, but there is a level of, education that.
We have people that have applied to be on the planning committee.
I'd have to defer to our administrative, department and HR, who track that. I haven't checked in with them recently, so I'm not sure of the status of applications. But I do know that there are currently 2 vacancies, and then at the next meeting with appointment of 2 elected officials to the City Council, there will be 2 more, so we'll have a deficit of 4.
These are 4-year terms.
Sarah will be,
Finally official.
it is an act of the City Council to move an alternate to.
It takes another vote of confidence? Oh, my goodness.
So that is at the discretion of the council.
And Eric, these are 4-year terms, is that right?
Regular members are 4-year terms. Alternates are 1-year terms, reappointed every year. And then membership is limited to 3 terms.
So is it 4 years total or 4 years once you're not an alternate anymore?
No, I'm on my 12th year, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've been-
Actually, term was 4 years.
I'm just trying to understand.
It's actually 4 full terms. Every member is sitting in a seat, so to speak. If you were to vacate your seat today, someone would take over your seat and fill out the remainder of your term. Then they could be appointed to their first term, their second term, and then their third term.
Is that what happens with alternates? We move up?
Alternates, you basically don't start keeping track until you are sitting until you're appointed to a full term.
And so would we move into, it doesn't matter, I don't care, but I mean.
When you move into that term, you're filling the remainder of a term, or you may by chance be starting at the beginning of a term.
I'm just trying to understand, because I think I was first put on planning and zoning in July of 2020. So it's just concerning to me that here maybe in 2 or 3 months, my term could be up too. But I could be.
If anyone has questions on their term and their appointment, the answer probably after the meeting.
There you go.
So, Eric, I just think in the process of review, I think it's important to at some point involve the major housing developers to get their feedback on what's proposed as changes. I don't know how you do that, but I think that's important in the process.
Okay.
Are you thinking like whenever we have this work session, maybe get members of the Home Builders Association on their input and stuff like that for some of those?
And I'd particularly like to do that, to get feedback into what they see as most impactful as far as Not necessarily that we would agree, but like to know that.
Certainly. We'll look into that, from a number of different angles. We've discussed it a little bit internally, but we'll continue with that.
And then just wanted to say, this will be my last meeting as liaison, and I just want to say I've enjoyed working with everybody, many of you as a member of this commission, and then further as liaison. So
Who's gonna be the new one?
somebody that's familiar to you.
Well, we appreciate your time that you've given us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, yeah. I do have a question. So I sat on the code revision before you joined us for like 18 months, and nothing's come of that. I'm just curious as to what, with Rachel Senzi and the attorney and what's going on. I'd like public record to hear what the thoughts were with all the volunteers that participated in that for 2 years.
Well, I'll just say that I think the last time we spoke that it is under kind of review right now for final draft. So we expect to have that, I think, come forward for city council review. I think is the next stage.
So what we proposed will be coming up for review.
I believe, and I'd have to check with Ms. Senzi to get the exact stats on that. I wasn't quite prepared at the meeting to kind of comment on it, but I think that's where.
No, I understand. You weren't even.
We can get you the current status of that, though.
I would appreciate it. I've actually reached out to her a couple times, and so several other members of that committee have reached out, and I mean, we haven't really been given any answers. So just kind of wondering what's going on with all of our work that we.
And I think the law department was looking at it just to make sure it's formatted and structured in a way
Correct, yeah. We got to the point where he was invited to the meetings, yeah.
Yeah, the slow list, blame the lawyers.
All right, well, I'd love to hear an update on that.
Our plan is to keep the housing or zoning code amendments on the agenda as another business item. Again, it might be perhaps more appropriate at the next meeting if the Planning Zoning Commission, wants to pursue a work session, we can discuss details on that. So pizza. And we have done that in the past.
Yeah. Well, I agree. It'd be nice to get your committee that you're working with before you start doing that, versus, I mean.
As far as having a committee other than the commission itself, is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, no, just the full commission. I mean, I mean, we're gonna have lots of new people, new faces. It'd be nice to have them instructed as to what the process is and.
Well,
It's ever
get out
turn.
there and get some applicants. I've talked to a few people about it, so.
And so, application forms, I believe there's a link on the city website for volunteer application. Citizens, can check numerous boxes for the different boards and commissions that are available for membership in that application form submitted here at City Hall, and get it up for consideration. If I'm stating it correctly, I believe applicants are first reviewed by the mayor and forwarded to the administration committee. And so ultimately appointments are recommended by the mayor and then put before the full commission, or sorry, the full city council for eventual vote.
Is that it? Any questions?
To adjourn?
And I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you all. Have a safe drive home.
But I gotta have